All right, welcome everybody. This is our last NAGT webinar of the semester. So very exciting, very sad, but we'll be back next fall. Our webinar series is your one-stop shop for strengthening work in Earth education. The webinars in our series feature novel and innovative work in Earth education research and pedagogy, new teaching materials, and the classroom experience of professionals just like you. The NAGT webinar is free and open to the public, and we encourage you to invite your colleagues to attend and join in the discussion. Just a quick reminder that participants in all NAGT meetings and events are expected to abide by the NAGT Code of Conduct, which applies in all venues, events, and online forums associated with NAGT. I just put the NAGT Code of Conduct in the chat, so if you haven't seen it already, please take a look at it and make sure you're abiding by that. I am going to pass it over to Catherine to get us started today.
Thanks so much, Bradley. And I don't think we say this enough. Thank you for all of your work throughout the webinar series. Really, this wouldn't happen without you. I am Catherine Rehimaki. I'm the organizer of today's webinars and actually 3 earlier ones that we had this spring. I am formerly of Princeton University. I now work for a stormwater company called Second Nature. As I mentioned, this webinar, Promotion, Tenure, and the Value of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Work, is the last of a series of 4 webinars sponsored by an NSF grant that is supporting the NAGT workshop for early career geoscience faculty. This is an amazing week-long workshop each summer that supports geoscience faculty in the first 3 years of a faculty position. The deadline for this coming summer has passed, but if you are an early career faculty member or have colleagues who are, please keep an eye out for the 2023 application. I'm putting a link to the workshop page in the chat for your reference. Our previous webinars in this series were on February 15th from Erica Marin-Spiota discussing the Advanced Geo program and the climate in the geosciences. On April 7th from Hendrada Ali speaking about how to create inclusive research and scholarly groups. And last Tuesday with Lisa White and Phoebe Cohen talking about inclusive teaching practices. You can find information about all of these webinars and this one on the NAGT website. Again, posting that in the chat. Finally, before I turn things over to our moderator and panelists, I want to put in a quick plug for the NAGT program, the Traveling Workshop Program, which I am chair of. We facilitate strategic planning workshops for earth and environmental programs across the country with 2 of our trained facilitators developing and implementing 1 to 2 day workshops in collaboration with their host faculty. If you are interested in transforming your program around DEI, curriculum, or any other topic, please look at our website or contact me directly. And that's the last link that I'll put into the chat. With that, I am so pleased to welcome our panel moderator, Tessa Hill, as well as panelists, Josh Villalobos, Aaron Velasco, Christina Ravello, and Aradhana Tripathi, and they will introduce themselves. So Tessa, over to you.
Thank you so much, Catherine, and thank you to NAGT for organizing and hosting this. And I do want to thank Bradley as well for seemingly making all the magic happen. I'm Tessa Hill. I'm a professor in Earth and Planetary Sciences at UC Davis. And I now have the pleasure of handing off introductions to our panel, actually. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists to start by introducing yourself, your position and your institution that you're at, and then tell us one additional thing you'd like us to know, your perspective or context on the specific topic of this webinar, valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion work in promotion and tenure. And I'll just kick off by asking Aaron to go first.
My name is Aaron Velasco. I'm a professor here at the University of Texas at El Paso. I also serve the state of Texas as a state seismologist. I have been here for 20 years. I've also been a chair. I've served in the dean's office. I've served in the provost office. I've been president of the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in Science. and currently serve as the chair of the National Committee for Geology and Geodesy and Geophysics. My perspective is that I've been a chair. I've been on different sides. I've written letters of support. I've actually, gone through the process and gotten people through that process of tenure, and I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you, Erin. I'll hand to Aradhna next.
Hi, my name is Aradhna Tripathi. I'm a professor at UCLA, affiliated with a few different departments, including Earth, Planetary and Space Sciences, Atmospheres and Ocean Sciences, and the Institute of Environment and Sustainability. I'm also the founding director of the Center for Diverse Leadership in Science, which is a grassroots organization that developed because we exist in a pretty conservative set of departments and institutions to agitate for change.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'll hand to Joshua next.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joshua Villalobos. I am an instructional and campus dean for El Paso. I've been in administration for about 6 years already. Prior to that, I was a geology professor. Graduated from the University of Texas at El Paso, where I am currently broadcasting from. So thank you, Erin, for letting me this space. One of the things that I just kind of wanted to express is that a lot of times people think that community colleges, which are already fairly diverse in our student bodies, don't necessarily need any DEI work, but it's actually quite contrary, because we actually do need to reach out to these students with various programs and initiatives, and we really do count on our faculty to help us with their persistence and retention while they're at a community college, in order to make them more aware of their education and how they can actually proceed to higher levels in their degrees. So I'm very happy to kind of discuss some ideas and some of the things that we've done, not only at El Paso Community College, but in collaboration with UTEP and other community colleges across the United States.
Thank you, Joshua. And now to Christina.
Hi there. I'm Christina Ravello. I use she, her pronouns. I'm at UC Santa Cruz. I've been here for 30 years. I'm a professor in the Ocean Sciences Department. I'm also currently the Associate Dean for Sciences focused on DEI issues. I've chaired the Committee on Academic Personnel, which is the committee that reviews all tenure and merit cases on campus. And I've also served in UC-wide Committee on Academic Personnel. So happy to be here and looking forward to this. Thanks.
Thank you so much. We have an amazing panel here, as you can hear, with a really broad set of expertise. So I prepared 2 questions to ask them, and we'll start with those, and then we'll start taking your questions in the chat, or you're welcome to also raise hands. But first, we're gonna get through the first 2 questions first. And so I'll ask the panel to go in any order. If you can give one recommendation to faculty on the tenure track who are deeply committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice work, what would you tell them around aligning this work with their institution's evaluation process?
I'd be happy to go first if that's helpful. I think I'd encourage you to believe in yourself and trust yourself, how you want to navigate the position, the department, and the university that you're in. What the specifics are for your particular context, what you want to do with your position, what you need. And if you don't know that is, in your department, then try to find those things out so you can do the assessment. I think you'll have a sense then of what, whether you can weave DEI in with your research, with your teaching, with your service. Are you in a situation where you can do these things and shine brightly? Are there people who might be threatened and be hostile? And if so, talk to some of the folks either within your department or outside of your department that you trust about how you can align your values and what you want to do with the specifics of the evaluation processes locally to be able to do that work. For me, I decided from the outset I wanted to do this job on my terms. And so the first proposal I wrote was one where I described how I was going to do those things. And I thought about kind of my tenure plan. And that meant that, you know, I was able to be very intentional in basically how I wanted to function within my job. I also see that there are, you know, others who take the decision because of their specific context that they feel like they need to hold their voice back until after tenure. And you know, that's something that I can also understand given that context that they're in. But I would say that I think there's a lot of opportunities if you're intentional early on and strategic by doing that kind of assessment and by thinking and talking with others who understand that institutional context as well to do those things.
So I'll go ahead and go next. So this is kind of an interesting panel, at least for me, because a lot of times faculty don't really consider community college as their first choice in their careers. And so that's one of the initiatives that I personally have, is to kind of open the doors in terms of the idea of possibly teaching at a community college for a lot of our graduates and postdocs. As a matter of fact, I just came from a celebration here at UTEP, trying to engage a lot of our graduate students into thinking about careers in community colleges. And in terms of diversity, like I was saying, a lot of our community colleges are fairly diverse in terms of administration, in terms of faculty, as well as students. But we do have a real big challenge in terms of making sure that our students who have a diverse background, that they persist and that they continue on with their education. So for us, we are constantly looking for faculty who are innovative in terms of programs to make sure that these students not only realize that, you know, there's a place for them in certain disciplines, as well as within the job market, as well as finding ways for faculty to actually incorporate those types of programs within their tenure binder. At community colleges, not every community college has a tenure system, but a significant number of them do, like El Paso Community College, which is a fairly rigorous tenure process. And so we're constantly working with faculty, not only to help them write grants, but to develop programs to make sure that we engage these students who are minorities or have unique backgrounds, to make sure that they feel comfortable, not only within the discipline that they're currently majoring in, but also feel comfortable that they're in a higher education system, which a lot of times our students, you know, this is a very foreign environment for them, as well as, you know, their families as well. So it's a very unique place to be in for DEI work for community colleges. And that's something that I'm always expressing to my faculty, especially if they themselves are minorities or have a unique background, to make sure that they remember what it was like to be at institution of higher learning, and they may have felt isolated or just not very well accepted. And so I think that's something that we love to work with our faculty on, and make sure that they get the recognition for that work, not only for tenure, but throughout their careers at our community colleges.
I can go, Erin, or do you want to go, Erin? Okay. Okay. So when I was thinking about this question, I thought about kind of like, what are the larger goals of DEI work in a university system, like to start with, and then I wanted as context. And I see two main goals, so just like to lump a lot of things into two main things. One is institutional transformation. So how do we change our university systems and academy to play a role in society that is actually independent from oppressive societal systems? I see that as a major goal. And at the moment, we function in the greater society as a way to reinforce and support it. If we want our university systems to like truly honor and respect people from all walks of life and to be equitable and to create equity beyond the academy, then we need to understand and interrogate our educational systems to ensure that we are working to promote principles of equity in the larger society. So I see that as a big goal for DEI work in the academy. The second, I'd say, is for all people from all identities and intersectional identities to thrive in our current university systems, so that they can so that they're equitable and that they can thrive regardless. So that has to do with inclusivity. It has to do with, you know, sense of belonging and things like that. So I think that depending on what you want, what part you want to play in these goals, the answer is a little bit different. So if you, in terms of institutional transformation, and just maybe in general, you know, as you know, DEI work is a lifelong commitment. So I think the first thing to do is self-actualization. So doing the work on yourself. You can't expect others to do the work unless you do it first. For some, this is all they can do before tenure. Because given the extreme workload and the system and what it takes to get tenure, depending on where you are, this is really important and foundational work. So I think it's also important to build a theoretical framework that helps guide what you do. So, you know, practice active listening, bystander intervention, develop an understanding of the history of oppression of different groups, read, discuss, learn, unlearn, and practice all these things in your spaces. Now, you might not get credit for these in your evaluation, but I just think it's so foundational. And if the idea is to get tenure, you've got to, you know, publish, you've got to get your research program started, then do that. And at the same time, you can be doing this other work. I think it's really important to develop skills as leaders, mentors, and teachers, right? Equity-minded leaders, mentors, and teachers. So learn how to empower grassroots efforts, build consensus, build structural diversity, apply inclusive teaching, mentoring, and mentoring tools and approaches. Practice all these things in all your spaces. And then I think what's really important in the long term, that's really important for the long term, is learn how your university system works and where the levers are. Because ultimately DEI work is activist work, it's problem solving, it's changing things that are pretty resistant to change. And so I think just, you know, getting to know your university well is really important, and figure out where those levers are. So in terms of practical recommendations, I think a lot of it depends on what institution you're at. So you have to make sure, obviously, that you get credit for all of this work that you're doing. And the best thing I can think of is to seek out mentors within your institution that understand how credit and recognition is given within your system, right? I mean, you can't change it, you know, you have to like work within it to start with and get tenure. So I think the key to that is making your invisible labor visible. I think we all have to practice writing our statements in such a way as that we highlight the mission of the university or the goals of the department, and then in that context, explain what we've done and how we're working to achieve those goals and those missions, and the missions of the department and the university. So, you know, I think in most cases, I think you write a personal statement. So I think that's super important, is to construct it in a way where you contextualize it within the goals and mission of the university and the department.
All right, I think everyone's covered everything. I'm done. No, I'm just joking. I have a little bit different perspective. I'm at the University of Texas at El Paso. It's an 85% Hispanic university, and it's become a Research One university while I've been here. I also have a different background in the sense that I was out 9 years before I became a professor. I worked for Los Alamos National Lab, and plus I worked for a company, Science Applications International Corporation. And when I got here, I was going to do my own thing. And if they didn't want me, I could always go back, right? So part of being who I am and being true to yourself is this is something that's really important to me. It's going to be something I'm going to do. But you also have to keep in mind who are the people that are deciding tenure. And and we have to be honest with that conversation, because who decides it is generally senior people. It's the full professors who, in many cases, in many departments, are dominant white and dominant male. So, you have to keep that in mind as you're moving forward. And it's just like anything. If you want to succeed in anything, you've got to know the lay of the land. You got to know your institution, but also you have to know the personnel. You have to know your chair, what they're eyeing for. You tailor your package towards that to be successful. But I always tell people, keep your eye on the prize, and that you will be rewarded, because once you get that tenure, you can do, especially if you're active in the field and you're becoming nationally recognized for that type of work. The university is going to love that in general. But to convince people that that's the right thing to do is sometimes very difficult. So as Aranya said, when she first started, I mean, that was what she was going to do, and and she was true to that, and has become, nationally recognized for that, internationally recognized for that work. So, and again, if it's important to you, keep it part of your portfolio, but be mindful of the landscape, because if you don't get tenure, you won't be able to have that platform to do the change that you think needs to be done.
Thank you so much for those answers. Okay, so we'll go to my second question for the panel, which is, this time, if you could give a recommendation or even a request to faculty who review promotion and tenure files, or maybe even those who might be able to change the policies at their own institution, what would you say? And you can go in any order.
I'll go first, since I went last, so maybe we should do that sort of rotation. As far as this is a part where going into senior leadership is actually important. If you want to make dramatic change in the institute, you got to be a leader. Josh, is Lonnie said, he's a dean now, and he has a say in what those policies are. And so really, any institution is going to be controlled really by its administrators, and you just have to make it part of the process. I'm very fortunate here. I have some really outstanding colleagues that are leading a cultural transformation grant for UTEP itself. I'm involved with those sort of things. Tenure is a huge, and being recognized for the work that you're done for DEI, it should be part of a formal process. And we're working on those things, but we're not there yet. And so I would say that it's really important. If we want change, it's got to be up and down the chain, and this work has to be valued.
So
Okay.
all this has been really, really fast. Just to kind of, I'm sorry. I mean, you want to go ahead and go?
No, that's okay. I thought we were going in reverse order, but go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So I just want to kind of piggyback on what Erin said, and I completely agree in terms of, moving into positions of, administrations, and that really kind of pushes forward. It's not exactly the most, like I was just saying earlier to another group, it's not the most rewarding job as much as being an instructor, but you do definitely get to push the things that you're most passionate about. Like for me, it's the, diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. But one of the things, if I could let everybody know in terms of this process, is get the data. Administrators love data. If you can show how these DEI initiatives and programs that you're excited about can change enrollment, can change aspects of your institution or your department, I think that makes huge strides in terms of making administration understand the importance of these issues, rather than just some of the great stories, but to have those great stories backed up with some really nice data sets as well.
I'll just sort of reiterate a couple of points that were made already, that I think that to make changes, you have to be in leadership positions. In the University of California, we have the academic senate system as well. So there are changes that are made via grassroots efforts, actually. And in fact, those are the best. That's the smoothest way is to get a confluence of both administrative and academic senate goals to align. I think that with respect to getting data, I think that's absolutely critical. And climate data or any data that has to do with how faculty perceive whether or not their DEI issues, or work is being evaluated and recognized. I think that's important because different parts of the system might think it's being recognized differently, so I would also say for people that are reviewing files, and if you have some control over how files are reviewed, I think it's really important to recognize biases in the meritocratic systems that we typically use. So there's biases in the metrics that are used for evaluation, in publications, in funding, in invitations to give talks, and these kinds of things. There's obviously biases in student evaluations. So there's biases in a lot of the traditional ways that we evaluate faculty, and I think it's really important to recognize those biases and try to minimize them in the way that you evaluate files. So there's assessment techniques that minimize implicit bias, and I think those are important. I think it's important in review systems to strive for equity. So take into account circumstances that are beyond the candidate's control. So COVID is a really great example of this. We've just gone through this. We know that COVID differentially impacted different people, and we all pretty much know that. We see it. We've lived it. But lots of things differentially impact people that are like circumstances that are beyond their control. And so I think that that the COVID impacts and the kind of reckoning that a lot of the universities have used to actually take those into account during personnel reviews, I think we can learn lessons from those and extrapolate and extend those to other kinds of circumstances beyond COVID. So things like child rearing leave or any disability related issues. I think there's lots of ways that we can extend what we've learned, I think, to those. And then in terms of models, because I think, Tessa, you asked for models of different ways of evaluating the system, and we're working towards a different model at UC Santa Cruz. I'll just mention 3 institutions in the US that have already transformed their personnel review evaluation processes. One of them is IUPUI. They now have a pathway for people who want to be evaluated holistically for their DEI work, so they can choose which way they want to, and they're very transparent about the kinds of things that count as DEI. PSU has a new policy, this Portland State University, that allows for after tenure to change the balance of your contributions to research, teaching, and service, provided it is consistent with departmental priorities. So that instead of asking everyone to do all of them excellent, and above and beyond, it's more like, okay, well, it's okay to shift your focus after tenure as long as it's aligned with the departmental priorities. So that means that some people can put all of their energy into service or teaching and using, kind of cutting edge approaches or whatever it is that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to do these things. So that's another model of faculty evaluation that I think is really powerful. And then the third one is at WPI. They have actually, so at University of California, we have these three buckets, right? Research, teaching, and service. And in fact, research is the bigger bucket. I mean, in reality, it's the one that counts the most. So what WPI suggests is why not, it's pretty hard. There's a lot of resistance to changing the importance of research at an R1 institution, right? So instead, what they're doing is they're expanding the definition of research. So that research can be scholarship of discovery, integration, application and practice, research of teaching and learning, scholarship of engagement. So there's kind of a broader definition of what fits into that research bucket. And that includes a lot of things that support DEI efforts. So that's a different model. So it's really heartening to see that we've got codified policies in some institutions across the country. There's probably more. Those are the ones that I know about. And they're great. I think they're great models to think about and how they might apply to your own institution. If you're in a leadership position, to maybe, like tweak the way evaluations are done to support kind of in some ways the development and the incentivization of like more holistic work by faculty, if that's what they want to do. Okay, that's it.
So there's been so much wisdom from my colleagues on this panel, and I'm just moved to have the opportunity to continue learning from them. I think it really speaks to the fact that they are not only administrators, but that they're actually leaders at the forefront of systemic change. I think what I'll add to what they've said from my own perspective is that I feel like faculty who review files for tenure and promotion really do have a responsibility, given the time that we're at, to really call for change. And that can manifest itself in a number of different ways. But I would also say that if we don't do this, our departments and the universities we're part of, then they're going to be the non-avian dinosaurs, right? But the departments and universities that do this, and we've been hearing about examples, they're going to be the ones that are going to be leading the way as we go through the decades ahead. I think it's also important for faculty to realize that the academy, a lot of our policies and practices around privilege and tenure, they were set up, in some cases more than a half a century ago. The expectations at that time are ones of assimilation. They were not ones of really, they were not truly liberatory practices that were being described, and that those are the practices and policies we've inherited, and it really is hugely problematic. What I also see is that there are these wonderful examples. Christina gave several of how institutions are changing these. Joshua talked about how this is built in. And even at the institution that I'm at, I've seen that recently that's also been changing due to concerted work by faculty. For example, there were a group of faculty who organized a symposium for the university on evidence-based effective teaching and teaching to support the changing diversity of our population. And so there were questions asked about, excuse me, why is it that best practices at other institutions that were being highlighted, why haven't they been introduced here yet, right? We had a chance to learn about examples from different institutions and learn about the stories of how this got implemented at different places. Question was asked, why is it that if research, teaching, and service are pillars, why yet is DEI not yet a pillar for evaluation? And that was asked when we had our chancellor and executive vice chancellor in the room, right? And what we saw then were that deans started to implement DEI statements being not just required for new hires, but also for current faculty as we came up for tenure and promotion. And this was staged in a way where first it was optional for the first year so that there wouldn't be a huge amount of resistance. And then the second year it was required. And then the third year files started getting sent back, right? So that was kind of a very, I think, a strategic way to stage things in. We're also seeing that there were discussions that emerged from that about how are we going to value team-based contributions? How do we value community engaged work that may not lead to publications, let's say, but are incredibly impactful and aligned with the mission of the university? So I think as a faculty member reviewing files, we should be motivated to look at change and to bring folks in who could share examples, to realize that there's kind of the power in being in particular rooms and exercising the power to convene. There's also ways we can be impactful by being a mentor to non-tenured faculty and being a really active mentor, being a champion, speaking up for them when they're not in the room. There's also mapping ways out to influence faculty, tenured faculty and administrators who will be in decision-making, who are in decision-making positions when it comes to tenured promotion processes. There's of course the direct appeals. A strategy we used here when that wasn't working was bringing chairs together from different departments. So that way our chairs could hear examples of practices in other departments as to how power was then being shared when it came to tenure and promotion decisions. Specific examples were like, instead of only having full professors or tenured professors attend tenure and promotion discussions, perhaps, like in this department, all faculty could attend those discussions. Maybe we should have more people we should have assistant professors be able to vote on tenure and promotions. And we've seen that, those changes eventually did get made in actually all of the 3 departments I'm in. We also have done things like held workshops for faculty and administrators with some of the same folks who are actually in this panel have been involved in the organizing and speaking at those workshops with our professional societies, with AGU, AMS, and GSA, to again, highlight examples of leadership. And then we've also organized just group faculty memos recommending structural changes. And so, these are all ways we've tried to request and encourage faculty who review files to change policies.
Sorry, I was having trouble finding my unmute. Thank you so much, panelists. I do have a question that was sent to me in the chat, and so I'm going to read off this question. I'm going to modify it slightly so it fits well with this discussion and see if any of you have thoughts. So perhaps you're a tenured faculty member who's not yet in an administrative role, so you don't feel like you can yet change institutional structures or the tenure process, but you do want to be very cognizant and supportive of these efforts within your department, and in particular, perhaps mindful of the fact that oftentimes assistant professors who are scholars of color are doing a lot of the labor on this work. And so how can departments, maybe even departments that are predominantly white, really support their assistant professors doing diversity, equity, inclusion, justice work, and also think about where the burden of the labor is falling?
Well, I have a couple of ideas on that. I think that one thing that departments and institutions can do is set up committees where that is in fact what their charge is, and ensure that faculty that are not from structurally excluded groups are the only ones in that committee or the ones on that committee, and ensure that that workload is actually distributed. I think that there are also opportunities for departments and universities to take a look at the service load that people have and to recognize that that is a burden that many of us have, and to then look at reducing potentially other service commitments accordingly, recognizing that there is that kind of invisible labor as has been pointed out. And then, a third thing that can be implemented, something that we do with the Center for Diverse Leadership in Science, is we actually created a faculty fellows program to recognize those faculty that are doing the work and confer cultural capital to them, provide them with resource, giving them something that can go on their tenure and promotion files, but to also equip faculty from some of the same departments that may be much less active, maybe some of the bystanders, and to actually work to cultivate them as change agents. So we actually map out then in departments where some of those faculty are, we try to make sure we're creating a community of faculty, so that way the burden, that labor will be shared. And so we'll also see kind of a change on the timescale of several years start to occur on the departmental level within those units.
These are great suggestions. Do any other panelists want to add in? I do have another question after this one, so go for it, Erin.
I mean, I think the workload policy is definitely important, you know, for every department. I don't know, I mean, I think that's done differently in different departments and different institutions, but I think that's really critical for there to be an evaluation and accounting of the workload in every department. Because if you do, and to make it very transparent, so that everybody in the department can see what everybody else is doing. So sort of, you know, reveal like what's going on, and develop a workload policy that takes into account that work. So that's one thing. And I think that underpinning that is the need for department chairs to be extremely well trained in equity-minded leadership. Because in most cases that, you know, the department is the strongest unit at a university, and that kind of strong leadership, I think, is really important for, you know, generating or formulating and imposing a policy. So those are the things that I can think of.
I just want to follow on. I'm going to go visit you on. You're doing some really cool things over there. I really want to see how some of this work. And part of it is that, let me just tell you my truth. Because I am a minority, I get asked to do a lot of things, period. It's just it's the way it is, especially out in the community. And so being 9 years out when I came in, I was able to say no. You know, no, I'm not going to do that. I was strong enough, in other words, and I wasn't really fearful of repercussions, because I figured I could go back to the lab, earn twice as much money. If you don't want me here, I'm good. But there has to be recognition, and the chair is key here. And so any junior faculty, I would say you got to like be meeting with the chair regularly. I really do believe that, to see what the pulse is there, you know. And that is on your workload specifically. Seek out mentorship. It doesn't have to be at your institution. Everyone here, I think, would serve as mentors if you had questions, you know, in the sense of seek mentorship, some guidance as you move forward, because that will help you along the road and give you different perspectives about what you should, where the dangers may be. And where the pitfalls may be as you move forward in your career. So those are the big things I would say, but really seek out mentors and work with your chair closely.
Joshua, anything to add on this one?
Yeah, you know what, great points. And so one of the things that I just kind of want to reiterate, and Erin talked about it a little bit, is that, you know, for those of us who have been doing DEI work for years, and in some cases decades, you know, we all understand that DEI work is not going to be solved with a silver bullet, but more of a silver buckshot. And it's these little tiny initiatives that our faculty do that make huge differences. And so I just kind of want to bring up some of the things like what we do with UTEP, right? So they have major grants through NSF, but then those faculty might have a small part of that grant to recruit community college students or to bring them on campus and maybe do some lab work. So it's those little tiny efforts that don't necessarily need to be massive in scope, but make a huge difference to students. And so somebody who is a DEI ally and is in a position where they may feel some pushback on some of their initiatives during the tenure process can still, in my opinion, do some of the work that is required of them for the publications, maybe even for research, but still kind of fold in laying down that framework or that path. So that way, when they do get full tenure, then they can jump fully into the DEI aspect of it and make those small programs that they may have probably tried out during those research projects into full-fledged projects and really make a huge difference. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a massive large-scale program, but it can be something very small, a tiny BB that really makes a huge difference to some students.
Wonderful. Okay, I have another question in the chat, and this one was directed at Christina, but I actually suspect that everybody will have thoughts on this. So we'll start with Christina and go from there. The models you described seem to focus on choice and flexibility, which is great. But does this or does it not contradict having some minimal requirement for every faculty member? In another way of saying that, should all faculty be expected to do some minimum amount of DEI learning and engagement?
I think yes. I think that I guess I can't remember who talked about this. Maybe it was Rodna. I mean, I think that there's a trend towards that, like with the inclusion of the DEI statement in the personnel review process. We just did a survey I just did a survey last year for the sciences that was about, I asked that question, right? Because the trick is, I don't know about how it is there, but at UC Santa Cruz, where our motto is like, the authority at questioning authority, like you don't really want to impose something from the administration onto the faculty. So you have to have the data of what the faculty think before you change anything. And so the survey actually asked faculty in the sciences, did they think that the fact that we are a Hispanic, and we're an HSI and an APZ, so we're a minority serving institution, and we're committed to closing equity gaps between different groups in our classrooms. And if you look at the statement of the mission of the university, should every faculty member be required to know about inclusive pedagogy and apply it in their teaching, know about equity-minded mentoring and apply that in their mentoring? Like, should that be a requirement? And I was really, I guess, kind of surprised that the majority of faculty said yes. And so I think it's like with that data where that's the data part, right? You have the data that's actually what people on the ground are thinking and feeling, that we could move forward with tweaking the system that we have so that we have that as an expectation. So I think the answer is yes, but making it so is a process. Yeah.
I do have another question. Oh, Aradhana, do you want to briefly comment on that?
Yeah, I think, Christina's spot on with what she said. And I loved hearing about that particular strategy that's being used, because I think it's down to, this is something that we want to see happen and should be the case, but there can be a huge amount of resistance from individual people. And that in turn is something that makes chairs not want to implement things, or maybe chairs don't see it that way. It means that deans and more senior leadership or senior administrators at universities may not want to push it through. And so this is where then being strategic about it and utilizing something like a survey or highlighting through a symposium, here's examples of what happened at Santa Cruz and how this was done, in these other places. That then is actually what, will push basically faculty to be open basically to this type of change. So I really appreciated hearing that story, Christina.
I have a question in the chat that's very related to that last comment of yours, Aradhana. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to do my final question for the panel. So if anyone would like to weigh in on this one, any of the four of you, there's a little bit of this inherent tension between what institutions look for in success, sort of metrics of success. Maybe recruitment and retention might be examples of those quantitative metrics of success, versus folks who are trying to create community where students, staff, and faculty thrive and feel that there's an inclusive environment. And so, do you have suggestions about how to sort of address that that inherent tension, but also, since you just brought it up, Aradhna, there's also a little bit of a tension around, are we, quantifying success with numbers, or are we doing climate surveys and looking at people's experiences in the department, or, what are we looking for in success?
So I'll say that I think that the models that we have for success are ones that really look at some of the some of the traditional academic metrics are ones that are not healthy, right? And they're actually ones that are associated with a dominant culture in our departments and universities that's highly exclusive. We really see this strongly in STEM, where the national numbers for 6-year graduation rates for people who are first generation, people who are Pell Grant eligible, people who are from structurally excluded racialized groups are, some cases they're like 15 to 30% compared to numbers that might be 1.5 times to 2 times that number for people who are white and or from the more privileged group, depending on which of those metrics one's looking at. And so I would just say that I think it's important for us to recognize that and think about how we need to do work to make our departments and our universities more healthy, because they really are not, the culture is not a healthy one. And so perhaps we should have other metrics that we're looking at as indicators of health. And so I think that's where climate surveys, qualitative interviews, exit studies, those are things that can be really useful. And those are actually places where community building, programs that support belonging, access, community building are ones that actually support cultural health within departments and within institutions. I mean, we grappled with this intensely here and realized that you might have labs and classrooms that serve as counter spaces to the dominant culture in a department within the university, but those were really kind of islands and we're not supporting broader institutional transformation. And so this is why with the structure of the center, we created again, a grassroots effort. It's a center with a small c. We self-organized and created something that cuts across departments so we could have critical mass, and started mapping out people we wanted to recruit to join this community. And eventually there was critical mass in departments to start pushing for change. It was a long-term exercise, but I think, that was kind of one set of strategies that we used.
It's great. Okay, panel, we have one question left, and I'm going to ask that we do this in a bit of a lightning round. So I'm going to only give you one sentence to answer the last question. The question you have is, if you could vision a future where diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice work was supported, resourced, and valued for faculty at all career stages, what does that future look like? I'm asking you to tell us in one sentence. I'm not going to call on you. You got to just go for it.
One where we see people engaged in transformative solidarity in departments, where there are coalitions of allies and individuals from different backgrounds who are all being active and in solidarity with each other to transform the culture.
Agreed. So that's not my. So one where we all have the exact same goals, and we also have the exact same definitions of what success is and who we're really targeting for DEI initiatives.
I'll go for it. So I think that my vision of a university that supports faculty at all career stages would be one with equity-minded leadership at all levels and a culture and climate that supports each community member to be self-actualized, in touch with their own identities and whatever that means to them, and to be accountable to themselves and each other.
For me, it's no more barriers for anyone.
It's wonderful. Catherine asked me to do a tiny bit of on-the-fly synthesis here. And so I'm just going to tell you some things that I heard repeatedly through this, or things that I think really resonated. Trust yourself was one that came up at the very beginning. Also, that the landscape and the context of our institutions matter. Some institutions may be more open than others, and we get to consider the goals that we have at our own institution for change. I heard one of our panelists say, commit to the work, the learning, and the unlearning, which I think is really important and powerful. And then, okay, here's a mishmash of advice that we heard. Call for change, answer the call, cultivate change agents, and think about this as silver buckshot, not bullets. Thank you so much, panel. We really appreciate your time. And those of you who posted questions in the chat, those were great questions. We appreciate your time and energy today. Catherine.
Thank you so much. This was amazing. This is being recorded, and I think this will be a resource for people. It was so chock full, Tessa. I'm sorry I gave you an impossible task of synthesizing it in one sentence, but thank you, Tessa, for your moderating skills. And the sad part is we didn't get to hear your voice actually offering your advice, but that will come another time. Everyone who is listening, if you can fill out the webinar survey that Bradley just put in the chat, you'll also get emailed it. And again, thank you so much for everyone who was on the panel, and Tessa, Bradley, and thank you all for attending.